August 1590. Governor John White steps back onto Roanoke Island after 3 years away and finds nothing. No houses standing. No bodies. No struggle. Just silence where 115 English colonists used to live. This is the story of the lost colony of Roanoke, America's oldest unsolved mystery. What White found that day would confuse historians for the next 400 years. Because the one clue he found wasn't blood, and it wasn't a body. It was a single word, carved into a wooden post, and it made no sense at all. 115 people. 3 years of silence. One carved word. This is what really happened to the lost colony of Roanoke and why the truth might be stranger than any disappearance. Rewind to July 1587. 3 ships land on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what is now North Carolina. 115 English men, women, and children step ashore to build a new colony. Among them is Eleanor Dare, the governor's own daughter, pregnant with her first child. Weeks later, she gives birth to a girl named Virginia, the first English baby ever born in the Americas. But the colony struggles almost immediately. Food runs short. Relations with nearby native tribes are already tense. English settlers had attacked a nearby village the year before. Over an accusation of theft, the villagers denied. The colonists need supplies badly. They beg their governor, John White, to sail home and bring back help. He doesn't want to leave his daughter and newborn granddaughter behind, but he agrees. White promises he'll be back within 3 months. It's the last time he ever sees his family. He has no idea it will be nearly 3 years before he sets foot on Roanoke again. White reaches England in November 1587, expecting to turn around within weeks. Instead, he becomes trapped by a war that has nothing to do with him or the family he left behind. In 1588, Spain launches the Armada, a massive invasion fleet aimed at England itself. Queen Elizabeth I orders every seaworthy ship held back for national defense. White's rescue voyage is grounded before it starts. Picture the ports of England during those 2 years, every dock crowded not with merchant ships bound for the colonies, but with warships being fitted for battle against Spain. Sailors who might have carried supplies to Roanoke were instead manning cannons in the channel. To White, watching from shore, every ship he needed was already spoken for by a war he didn't start. White does manage to secure 2 small ships in April 1588, but they never reach Roanoke. Chasing quick plunder, the crews attack other vessels along the way and get attacked in return. Battered, they limp back to England without ever crossing the Atlantic. For 2 more years, White cannot get another ship approved. He writes letters. He begs officials. England is fighting for its own survival. Back on Roanoke, the 115 colonists have no idea any of this is happening. No ship arrives in 1588. None arrives in 1589. As far as they know, England has simply forgotten them. They face a brutal choice. Stay in a fort with dwindling food and wait for a rescue that keeps not coming, or leave, and try to survive with the people who actually know this land. Think about what daily survival looked like during those 2 silent years. Fences needed repair. Crops needed planting and guarding. Every meal depended on supplies that were supposed to arrive from England and never did. The colonists weren't waiting idly, they were rationing, trading, and stretching what little they had, all while watching the horizon for sails that wouldn't come. Before White left, the colonists had already agreed on a signal. If they had to leave, they would carve their destination into a tree or post. If they were attacked, they'd carve a cross above it. Now, back to August 1590. White finally lands, guided by smoke he saw rising from the tree line. He races toward the old fort, hoping to see his daughter's face again. Instead, he finds the settlement dismantled, not destroyed, dismantled. Houses taken apart carefully, as if the colonists packed to leave on purpose, not fled in panic. Then he sees it, cut cleanly into the wood at eye level, no rush or panic in the strokes. Carved deep into a fence post, Croatoan. One word. No punctuation. No explanation. Just 8 letters, carved by a hand that clearly had time to finish the job. And there's no cross above it. That's the detail that matters most. The colonists' own signal for danger is missing. Whatever happened, it wasn't an attack. Croatoan was the name of a nearby island now called Hatteras and of the native people who lived there. The colonists hadn't panicked. They had left a clear address. White should have sailed straight there. Instead, a massive storm rolls in that night. His crew, low on supplies and anxious to leave, refuses to wait it out. The ship's anchor cable snaps in the storm. With no way to safely reach Croatoan Island, the captain turns the ship back toward the Caribbean and then home to England. John White never sets foot in America again. He dies years later in Ireland, never knowing for certain what happened to his daughter, his granddaughter, or the other 113 colonists. For 4 centuries, that single word was treated as a dead end. But historians looking closer realized Croatoan wasn't a mystery, it was an answer nobody wanted to accept. The Croatoan people had been friendly to the English from the very first landing. Their leader, Manteo, had even sailed to England and back, learning the colonists' language. If the colony was starving and threatened by other tribes, moving in with allies who already knew them wasn't a desperate last resort. It was the obvious plan all along. But back in England, the public never heard this version. Word spread that the colonists had simply vanished, swallowed by a wild, savage frontier. The truth was less dramatic, and far more human. 17 years later, in 1607, English colonists founded Jamestown, just up the coast. They immediately started hearing rumors of survivors, people living inland who spoke English and lived among native communities. Captain John Smith recorded reports, relayed through Chief Powhatan's own messenger, that survivors at a place called Roanoke had taught local people to build houses with stone walls, a detail no isolated native community would have had reason to know. In 1609, the Virginia Company instructed Jamestown's new leaders to search for the Roanoke colonists, reportedly living under a chief to the south. A rescue expedition was actually approved. But before it could set out, war broke out between Jamestown and the Powhatan Confederacy, and the search was abandoned. The strongest lead in the entire mystery simply never got followed up. A separate account, written by colonist William Strachey, claims Chief Powhatan admitted to having some of the colonists killed years earlier. Not every version agrees on how it ended. Some historians think part of the group didn't stay near Roanoke at all. They moved north to Chesapeake Bay, closer to where Jamestown would later rise, and lived there for years before any conflict. So the public version stayed frozen, a colony that vanished into thin air. The version closer to the truth that they were alive, nearby, and simply not looked for got buried by history. For nearly 400 years, that was where the story stood until archaeologists started digging in the right place, on Hatteras Island, exactly where that carved word pointed. Since the 1990s, digs on Hatteras have turned up 16th century English items buried alongside Native American artifacts in the same layers, in the same households. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what's next. A research group called the First Colony Foundation has spent over a decade on these digs, using tools like ground-penetrating radar to trace old settlements without disturbing what lies beneath. Archaeologists found parts of an English gun, a slate writing tablet, and a signet ring bearing a lion crest, items no isolated native community would have owned or made on its own. These weren't trade goods passed hand to hand for decades. They were mixed directly into daily native life tools, jewelry, and hardware used by people actually living there. Genealogists and historians have also traced surnames among today's Lumbee people in North Carolina: Dare, Cooper, Berry, matching names straight off the original 1587 colonist list. Oral tradition passed down for generations among that community describes ancestors who spoke English and had gray eyes long before any written record confirmed the connection. None of this proves exactly what happened to every one of the 115. Some may have split into smaller groups. Some may have died of disease or conflict. But total disappearance no longer fits the evidence. Picture it from the inside. You're a colonist in 1588. Your governor is gone. Your food is gone. But 50 miles away, there's a community that speaks a little of your language and knows how to survive here. You don't wait to die proving loyalty to a king who forgot you exist. You pack what you can carry, carve one word for whoever comes looking, and walk. That's the version almost no one tells. Not a colony erased by the wilderness, a colony that adapted, intermarried, and simply kept living, just not as the English anymore. From the outside, from London, from later historians, from generations of American schoolbooks, it looked like a mystery with no answer. From the inside, it may have simply looked like a Tuesday. The lost colony isn't lost because no one knows where they went. It's lost because the people who wrote the history books weren't the ones who survived to tell it. John White's own written account, later published by Richard Hakluyt, records the missing cross and the calm, deliberate carving he found. He spent the rest of his life unable to return, unable to know, and unable to let it go. That's not the ending of a horror story. That's the ending of a man who ran out of time. Virginia Dare would have been 3 years old the day her grandfather searched an empty fort for her. If the theory holds, she may have grown up not as a lost colonist, but as a member of the Croatoan people. Today, Virginia Dare's name is everywhere in North Carolina: a bridge, a wine brand, a county, a strange kind of fame for a baby whose actual fate nobody has ever confirmed. No skeleton has ever been found. No mass grave. No burned fort. For a supposed tragedy, the lost colony of Roanoke left behind astonishingly little evidence of anyone dying at all. What it left behind was one calm, deliberate word, carved by people who knew exactly what they were doing, and a governor who arrived just a little too late to follow them. The lost colony became the origin story America returns to again and again, retold in plays, textbooks, and campfire tales for over 4 centuries, long before anyone dug up real proof. 400 years later, we're still telling this story as a mystery. Maybe the real twist is that it was never really lost. It was just never followed. So here's the question worth sitting with: if you were down to your last supplies, abandoned by your own country, with a friendly community nearby, would you have waited, or would you have walked?